Hello, everyone. I'm Kamraun.
And I'm Billy. Welcome to the HorseFrog podcast, home of your two favorite professional digressors.
Yeah, we've been really acing that digressor test lately. A lot of long diversions were going on.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. You should hear us before the show, folks.
Yeah, it can go on for a while. Today we will be discussing Book 4, Chapter 11 of Gardens of the Moon, a novel in the Malazan Book of the Fallen. This is part 1 of our coverage of this chapter. We're trying to keep these episodes to roughly an hour or so we'll continue to split the chapters up to hit that target duration.
Now, this podcast series is intended to be a companion to reading or listening to the book set in the Malazan universe. It's not a book review, and it's not going to be a critique either. Just know going in that Kamraun and I love this series more than any other fantasy series, and we would do anything to meet Steven Erikson.
We definitely love it. And yes, I would like to meet Steven Erikson. I would do anything to be able to have enough money to make this series.
Yes.
Like if I had ultimate ability to do something.
Oh, you mean like a series, like a movie
yes,
or a television series?
Yes,
absolutely.
That's like my dream. Yes.
Yeah.
Oh man, if I had enough money, I'd be like, I love these Hollywood producers to come tell me how they want to change stuff. I'm like, nope, no changes.
Nope. No changes. It goes in as is.
Unless Steven Erikson says so.
Yes. And you know what? Steven Erikson is probably the most fair-minded individual writing-wise because of his, like I said, there's no sexism and stuff in his universe.
That's why I love it.
Folks is folks.
Yeah.
I do too. It's like you don't care.
He writes all the races, all the people, all the genders. I mean, it's all there. So you don't need to change anything because everybody's covered at some point.
Yes, absolutely. We don't need a gender swap because some of the baddest dudes are chicks.
Yes.
Serious.
Yes. The baddest dudes. Nice way to say that.
I mean no offense at this, ladies. I mean that in all love and respect. Some of my favorite characters in this book are female for sure.
Yes. We will be covering the events of the books in a linear fashion. There will be spoilers for those that have not read the books. We will try not to spoil anything prior to us covering that portion of the respective book.
Now, a quick warning. Today's episode will contain descriptions of graphic violence, and it's not recommended for children.
Do we have any violence today?
I don't. We have some disturbing imagery.
Disturbing imagery. Okay. Yeah.
This one has disturbing imagery.
Okay. Does birthing of a child disturb you, Billy?
No, it's the creature that comes out of to the birth.
Yes. Yeah. I gotcha. Okay. Yeah. The Frankenstein creature.
Oh, now that's now I can get her to watch that with me. She has not seen Young Frankenstein.
Okay.
So that one's one that because I did Princess Bride as homework. I'm going to have her do that with me tonight. We'll laugh at that.
Okay. Yeah. Fun. I think she'll like that. I mean, it's hard not to like that movie. Yeah.
It's amazing. I don't like a lot of Mel Brooks stuff, but that is like one of the greatest movies of all time because I love horror movies.
Yes. All right. Book 4, Assassins.
Assassins? I'm sorry.
Chapter 11. The chapter begins with Kruppa sitting with his hands held over a flickering, undying fire that had been stoked by an elder god. He feels it's an odd gift, but he sensed a significance in it. He says, Kruppa would understand this meaning, for rare and unwelcome is this frustration. Is it rare for him to not know or understand something?
Yeah, this guy's never at a loss for words as far as I know. So even in saying he knows nothing, he says a lot. But
yeah. He definitely has enough to say about himself. He's always talking in third person about himself.
Yes. Ad nauseum.
He found himself in a barren landscape with no sign of habitation in sight. He squatted by a lone fire in the tundra. He could smell rotting ice in the air. To the north and to the east, the horizon gleamed green, almost luminescent. He saw no moon in the sky. Kruppa had never before seen anything like this, yet it was an image fashioned within his mind. He says, "Disturbing indeed," proclaims Kruppa. "Are these visions of instinct, then, unfurled in this dream for a purpose?" Kruppa knows not, and would return to his warm bed this instant were the choice his. He looks around at the lichen and moss-covered ground and frowns at the strange, bright colors. He'd heard tales of Red Spire Plain, a land far to the north beyond the Lateron Plateau. Quick reminder, the Lateron Plateau is almost as far north as you can get on the continent of Genebacus.
Okay. Still waiting on that picture.
I apologize that I did not follow through on my homework, apparently. Yeah. You know what it was? I just didn't get one that I needed the right lighting, and I just...
you know what? It's like I think I must get one.
Okay.
Because I like what it's doing for yours. It does a lot for me. Thinking about this map and how the land is actually, because in particular, there's only in fantasies I've read, most lands are not places that are in and of themselves a character, and to me, the world of the Malazan universe is very much a character, and as is the land in Steven Erikson, and also that's really about the only places that lands speak to me that I can think of offhand.
The world starts with the land.
Oh, Dune. I'm sorry. Dune was the other one. That ecosystem is a real ecosystem as well.
Yes.
Because I think that's why we like those in particular. Probably why we like Dune and why we like this one so much in particular. I think they're built from the ground up in a way. To some extent.
I don't know how Frank Herbert planned that out. I'll have to do some research on seeing what his thought process was there.
I know for a fact that Herbert had done a lot of studies on desert.
Okay.
And about the planting of grass and all that stuff that we do and that we do to plant it, and that what is done in the later series of Dune is stuff that he looked real deeply into that.
Okay. And there was like economic studies as well, right?
Yes, he's very serious economic studies as well.
Mm-hmm. That might be a lot of my interest in it, because I really like economics as a subject.
I get that too. And that couched economics, that and this have couched economics in a way that I can swallow, because I have a hard time following that.
Okay.
And in Dune, using it as that really helped me.
Okay.
In a strange way. So, yeah. There it is, folks. Your professional digressors hard at work.
They are aware. They are very aware of our digressions, I'm sure.
Yeah, I'm sure they are.
All right, so Kruppa had just noticed the colors, and he wonders if this is what tundra looks like. He'd always pictured tundra as a bleak, colorless world. He says, "Yet peruse these stars overhead. They glisten with a youthful energy, nay, sparkle as if amused by the one who contemplates them, while the earth itself hints of vast blushes of red, orange, and lavender." Kruppa stands up as he hears a low thunder from the west. In the distance, he can see a massive herd of brown furred beasts. He watched them for some time. When they came closest to him, he saw the reddish streaks in their fur and their horns sweeping down, then up and out. The land shook with their passage. I envision these as some type of yak-type creature. How about you?
You know, I was thinking that kind of. Are you thinking of what about mammoths?
Well, the mention of the horns going down then back up, to me, mammoths and elephants don't have horns, right?
No, they got them tusks. That's right. That's right. So yeah, you're right. Yak would be it. Yeah. Okay. You know, and I also like the idea of looking at something like this tundra and realizing that while I too think of it as a bleak place, it is far from colorless.
Right.
There's actually quite a lot of life here, and I think it's what's overwhelming Kruppa right here.
Mm-hmm. Kruppa says, "Such is the life in this world." Kruppa wonders, has he traveled back then to the very beginning of things? A voice behind him says, "You have." Kruppa turned to face this new voice. He says, "Ah, come to share my fire, of course." Before him, he saw a squat figure covered in the tanned hides of deer or some such animal. Antlers stretched out from a flat skull cap on the man's head, gray and covered in fuzzy skin. Kruppa bowed. He says, "You see before you Kruppa of Darujistan." The visitor says, "I am Pran Kol of Kanig Tol's clan among the Kron Talan." I love how every time the IMAS introduce themselves, it's like so many titles, like names.
A lot. There's a lot to it. Well, what scares me too, and is how many clans are there? Are we ever told specifically?
I don't remember. We're introduced to a number of them.
I don't either. The Kron is Tool's group, and that's the group that suffered the loss. Remember that last chapter or chapter before that when he told the adjunct about, well, we're waiting for the other groups to show up. Mm-hmm. And she's like, whoa. if we only know about they've only known about this one group.
Yeah. Well, I guess if it's hunter-gatherer type people, they're spread out pretty wide into these clans, right? And
yeah,
what?
I'm sorry. You mentioned herder. I'm a sheep herder. Yes, you are herding those sheep. I'm sorry. South Park. Hoarding. Remember the hoarding episode and the Inception and all that stuff? The Inception. That's what the episode's called. You asked for it, sorry.
I mean, any statement I make could be asking for it when it comes to South Park. What haven't they covered at this point?
I don't. The only thing that I know they haven't covered is probably this. Book. This series of books. They've covered the fantasy genre quite well.
Yeah.
And lampooned it beautifully.
That was one that they were all pretending to be Lord of the Rings characters, and then somebody showed up as...
That's Game of the Thrones / Lord of the Rings.
Somebody showed up as Star Trek.
He shows up as Star Trek, dude. It's Kevin. It's Kevin's group of Star Trek. Do you remember what that fight was about? Do you remember what that 3-parter was? That's Black Friday, and that's the fight to the death between Bill Gates and the president of Sony to see who's going to win the console wars.
Oh man, it's been so long since I watched that.
And Microsoft, that's like a perfect lead into the game Stick of Truth, which is a beautiful game.
I played it.
It's
Finally.
a magnificent game. Oh, did you play it? It's a magnificent game. Oh my! If you're like me and you love old school RPGs, it's South Park with an old school RPG. It's wonderful, and they actually did it themselves too.
Yeah, it was really fun. I kind of feel like I hacked it in a way because the class that I was playing, I think I could heal myself, and basically I just felt invulnerable the whole time.
There's the one that I think about was the thief that could actually do the backstab move, which snuck off from your side of one side of the screen and came up behind the other people, and it was really OP. He was really overpowered, and but it's still a funny game though. I have part 2. I haven't played it yet.
I started it a little bit, but I never got that far in it because it was a little bit different. The battle system was different.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was different, and I like the old school. Okay, sorry.
Yeah, we
huge digressions.
Try and stay on track here. Let's not lean into that digression thing too much.
Okay, sorry. Hey, I'm learning it today, so sorry.
Pran stepped close and crouched before the fire. He says, "I am also the white fox, Kruppa, wise in the ways of ice." He glanced up at Kruppa and smiled. Pran had a wide face, the bones pronounced beneath smooth gold skin. His eyes were barely visible between tight lids, but what Kruppa saw of them was a startling amber in color. Is this the first description we've had of a living Talan? We've had description of Tool's bone structure so far, but I don't remember any living ones.
I think you're right.
Pran reached out long, supple hands over the fire. He says, "Fire is life, and life is fire. The age of ice passes, Kruppa. Long have we lived here, hunting the great herds, gathering to war with Jaghut in the Southlands, birthing and dying with the ebb and flow of the frozen rivers." Kruppa says, "Kruppa has traveled far then." Pran says, "To the beginning and to the end. My kind give way to your kind, Kruppa, though the wars do not cease. What we shall give to you is freedom from such wars. The Jaghut dwindle, ever retreat into forbidding places. The Forkrul assail have vanished, though we never found need to fight them. And the Kachain Shamal are no more, the ice spoke to them with words of death." In regards to the Kachain Shamal, that's another elder race that's just kind of thrown out there. Yeah. And we will get to know more about them in later books. I can't say much about them now because I don't want to ruin anything about them.
No.
Also, this notion that the Jaghut are in retreat is important. They just want to be left alone. And even though the Talan can see them retreating, they still can't accept their existence.
I know, it's got to kill them all. And especially with this, I don't understand, why are they threatened by the Jags and they're not threatened by the Forkrul assail?
I don't specifically remember if they ever call out why.
Yeah, it's a serious animosity between these two, though.
Pran looks back to the fire. He continues, "Our hunting has brought death to the great herds, Kruppa. We are driven south, and this must not be. We are the Talan. But soon the gathering comes, and so shall be voiced the right of Imass, and the choosing of the bone casters. And then shall come the sundering of flesh, of time itself. With the gathering shall be born the Talan Imas and the First Empire.
First Empire. Okay. That helps me to learn. With the First Empire, this is the first mention of the origin. We shall be born. Okay. That just helped me feel a little bit better about the First Empire. That cemented something for me in my head.
Yeah, and then the first throne, the true first throne, the person who sits on it controls the First Empire.
Yeah. Okay.
Kruppa says, "Why," Kruppa wonders, "is he here?" Pran shrugged. He says, "I have come for I have been called. By whom, I know not. Perhaps it is the same with you." Kruppa says, "But Kruppa is dreaming. This is Kruppa's dream." Pran says, "Then I am honored. One of your time comes. Perhaps this one possesses the answers we seek." Kruppa followed Pran's gaze and raised an eyebrow. He says, if not mistaken, then Kruppa recognizes her as a Rivi. A middle-aged woman approached them. She was far along in her pregnancy. Her facial features echoed those of Pran Cole, though far less pronounced. Fear and determination were evident in her eyes. When she reached the fire, she mostly focused on Pran. She says, "Talan, the Talon Warren of the Amass of our time, has birthed a child in a confluence of sorceries. Its soul wanders lost. Its flesh is an abomination. A shifting must take place." She turned to Kruppa and opened the front of her robe, revealing her pregnant belly. There was a newly traced tattoo in the likeness of a white-haired fox visible. She continues, "The elder god walks again, risen from blood spilled on consecrated stone. Kroll came in answer to the child's need and now aids us in our quest. He apologizes to you, Kruppa, for using the world within your dream, but no younger god can influence this place. Somehow you've made your soul immune to them. The rewards of cynicism," Kruppa responds, bowing. She smiled. This dream's wild.
Yeah.
It appears to be in a location at multiple points in time and immune to the meddling of the gods in the current time. Pran exists as he did prior to the taking of the vow, as does the land around them. And then Kruppa, Kroll, and the Rivi exist in their current forms, present day. When Kruppa speaks of cynicism, do you think he means that he gives the gods no power by not believing in them?
I'm guessing he's an odd talent. Because, the thing with him is I just don't know. We know so little about him. We see, and this is not through lack of seeing him. We see him quite a bit. But everything we see from him is a smokescreen. So I don't know if this is a natural. I think he has to be very powerful. And to be separate, though, how do you remove yourself from being noticed by the gods if you're living on our world?
He talks a little bit about it later, I think.
I guess he does.
Pran says, "I understand you would make of this child, born of Imass powers, a soul taken." She responds, "Yes, it is the best we can manage, Talan. A shapeshifter, which we too know as soul taken, must be fashioned." This is the first time we've heard that word, soul taken, referring to beings which can shapeshift between their natural form and that of an animal. Remember this concept because it is important.
Yes, very, very important.
And yeah, there's another derivation of this type of thing that will come later that can make it a little bit confusing. So just remember, soul taken is being able to shapeshift into one animal.
Yeah.
Kruppa pointed out that they are missing someone vital to the proceedings. The Rivi tells him that she is frightened and striding two worlds. Kroll is guiding her into Kruppa's realm, and it falls to Kruppa to welcome her. Kruppa adjusts the sleeves on his faded, threadbare cloak. He says, "This should not prove difficult for one of Kruppa's charms." Yeah, he always looks so greasy and shabby. Imagine being greeted by him randomly in some remote location.
I think of Bueno Excelente from Section 8. It's like this, he's the hero that fights crimes with the powers of perversion. It's from Batman. It's Hitman universe. It's DC, but I have this lovely picture of a sweaty white guy.
Definitely, it's kind of a Ron Jeremy-esque looking guy.
Yes. Because especially with it's the hair. I can always think of this because it's always mentioned about how oily Kruppa's hair is, like it's running down onto his shirt. Oily.
Well, it's always sweaty, and he's mopping his brow, right? So you imagine this sweaty, greasy hair. Just
yes. It can be 30 degrees and he's still hot and sweaty.
I think he's like, sweaty during this tundra episode.
Yeah. Well, it's a way of life, I guess. The
Reeve frowned and says, "Perhaps. Her flesh is abomination. You have been warned." Kruppa nodded affably and looked around. He asked, "Will any direction do?" Pran laughed. The Reeve tells Kruppa she suggests walking south. Kruppa shrugged and bowed to them, then began walking south. After some time, he turned around and found himself alone with no fire visible behind him. A full moon had appeared on the eastern horizon, bathing the land in silver light. The empty tundra lay ahead as far as Kruppa could see. Suddenly something distant appeared, walking with great difficulty. It fell once, then climbed back to its feet. Even in the moonlight, it appeared black. Kruppa moved forward and stopped when he was 30 feet in front of the individual. When inspecting her, he saw that she had been a woman once, tall, with long black hair. Now she appeared long dead, withered, and the flesh had changed to the hue of dark wood. Her limbs had been roughly sewn back on her body. Kruppa realized she had been torn apart. That's a real Frankenstein image there, isn't it? Worse, actually, since the flesh is withered. At least he would get freshly dead parts, right?
Newly dead, man. It's like, this one is, and I forget that, obviously Bellerdan had to have stitched her together in order to bury her, I guess. So it's a real ugly image. That's a really nasty image. And it gets a little bit deeper as we get deeper. I mean, just because it's horrific and pitiful together.
Yes. Just the thought of being trapped in that and stumbling along. You're terrified. You don't know where this is going to end up.
Yeah.
It's hard to tell how much consciousness is in there.
Yeah. It's just horrific. That's what I was getting about. To me, this is the ugly, the hard image of this chapter. Other than this, there's nothing real disturbing except other than this. Could you imagine seeing this on a television show? I mean, he writes so visually. I never have any problem imagining anything that happens in his books.
It's kind of like a zombie.
Yeah. Imagine that zombie with just seeking for sound or seeking for something but can't see or hear anything.
Yeah. The woman's head flew up and she finally saw Kruppa. She stopped walking, her mouth opening, but no words emerged. Kruppa surreptitiously cast a spell upon himself. He could see the spell of preservation that had been woven about her, but noted that something had twisted the spell, reshaping it. Kruppa barked out, "Lass, I know you can hear me. Your soul is trapped within a body that is not your own. It does not become you. I am named Kruppa, and I will lead you to succor. Come." He spun and began walking in the direction he had come from. After a moment, he heard the sound of shuffling behind him. He whispered, "Ah, Kruppa has charms indeed, but more, he can be harsh when necessary." The fire had returned, a beacon guiding them. He could see the Reeve woman and Pran awaiting them. The spell he had cast caused them to appear blinding to him. Such was their power. That's interesting, isn't it? I guess he has kind of a detect magic spell going on. Is that what you...
Yeah. And it would have to be. It's, instead of just like a light glow, these guys, I'm assuming they're lit up like beacons. Hard to look at.
Pran thanks Kruppa and notes that he can see the effects of the eye mass on her, this being their Nightshell's body.
Yes.
The Reeve addressed the woman. She says, "Hear me, lost one. Your name is Tattersail. Your sorcery is Thyr. The warren flows within you now. It animates you, protects you. It is time to bring you back into the world." She once again exposed her pregnant belly. Tattersail recoiled in alarm. Pran says, "Within you is the past, my world. You know the present, and the Reeve offers you to the future. In this place, all is merged. The flesh you wear has upon it a spell of preservation. And in your dying act, you open your warren within the influence of Talon. And now you wander within a mortal's dream. Kruppa is the vessel of change. Permit us to aid you." When it's laid out like this is one complicated scenario. I think only someone like Tattersail would be able to process all that. To your average person, that would sound like a word salad, you know?
Oh, yeah. We only know what it means just because we have the benefit of having read this series and are steeped in the lore. I mean, he spells it out really clearly, but I mean, for just you being in that scenario, at least Tattersall's able to understand inside this bag of flesh.
Well, is there much flesh left? It's all burned up and
bag of bones. Yeah.
Tattersall staggered into Pran's arms with a wordless cry. The Reeve woman joined them. Kruppa says, "My, but Kruppa's dreams have taken a strange turn. While his own concerns are ever present, a haunting voice, once again, he must set them aside." I hadn't really thought that this is all new to him, prior till now. He doesn't know anyone here aside from Kroll. Quite a lot to take in, especially on the prior point I made about Pran's summary of Tattersall's situation, right?
Absolutely. I mean, the fact that Kruppa just takes it all in stride, I mean, I think it kind of just betrays a glint of the true master that he probably is underneath all this disguise of slipperiness and whatnot, which we get a little more hint at, not in this episode, but next episode as we talk more about Kruppa seen through somebody else's eyes.
Yeah. Kroll appeared at his side. He says, "Not so. It is not my way to use you without just recompense." Kruppa looked up at him. He says, "Kruppa asks for nothing. There is a gift in this, and I am glad to be part of its making." That's quite different than the Kruppa we are used to seeing, given his propensity for food and drink.
Yeah, I think it's quite generous. Very generous offer him. Is this why he gains Kroll's favor? Is it just the fact that he just could creep in, or is it because Kroll could come into his head when we first were introduced to Kruppa? We're introduced to Kroll not too long afterwards. And is it just because? I mean, is that why he gains this entity's favor, or is it all a facade, or is any of what we see from Kruppa real? I mean. That's the weird thing about Kruppa.
I think this is him being genuine.
I think so too. And I mean, I think he's genuinely just a kind of a generous moment. I think he's kind of amazed at this. It's because it never once mentions that he feels threatened or scared in any of this. He's more intrigued. He just seems to be kind of like, this is kind of interesting.
Mm-hmm. You can tell some big stuff's going down.
Yeah. And he takes it all in stride.
Kroll nods, but still insists Kruppa name something. Kruppa tells Kroll of Rallick and Murillo's efforts to right an old wrong. They think Kruppa is ignorant in the matter, but he intends to turn their schemes to serve him. He feels guilty about it, but he needs them. Kroll asks what of the coin-bearer. Kruppa informs him that the protection has been set in motion, though its final shaping hasn't come. He reveals that he knows the Malazan Empire is covertly present in Darujhistan. Kroll tells him that what the Empire seeks isn't clear even to them, and that Kruppa should use this to his advantage when he meets them. Kroll goes on to warn Kruppa that two individuals approach Darujhistan, one a Talan Imas and the other a bane to magic. Their purposes are destructive, but there are forces already in motion to deal with them. He tells Kruppa to seek knowledge of them, but not to oppose them, since they are dangerous. He finishes saying, "Power attracts power, Kruppa. Leave them to the consequences of their actions." That's that power attracts power theme again.
Yeah.
It's such an important concept in this series.
Yeah. Well, I'm always amazed in this series how it's like, and I know I've mentioned it before, how he keeps managing to build through the book. And you think, man, you keep seeing some crazy stuff and crazy stuff and crazier stuff and crazier stuff. It's just like he just keeps going.
Yeah, the escalations.
And it's just like, he's so good at the escalations. To me, it's just masterful.
Yeah.
I was reading a subreddit that was just so full of blasphemy. It was that they just couldn't understand why this series is so good. And I said, I dropped it. I said, hey, you need to be listening to the HorseFrog Productions.com. Really? We try to make it clear to y'all.
Really?
We try to make it real. Yeah.
What was the blasphemy?
It was like, it's just too big. It's just too this. It's too that. It's like, dude, read the book. I'm reading that S. Gates. It's just so much going on. Yeah, it's great because there's so much going on, dude. It's because you'll be able to come back and enjoy this thing over and over and over again because you keep seeing different things. I mean, doing it with you has made it so much different than my previous readings. I don't realize how much he's been information dumping us because there's so much he's dumped on us. And just taking a weekly look at this lets me realize, good gravy, this guy gives you so much information. I get why people are overwhelmed, but it's because we gloss over it. He tells it right there. It's very clear. We just try and speed read through it.
You don't know what you don't know, though, when he's putting that information out there.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
That's true. It's a lot. It is a lot. I get why it's daunting. I do. But that's what we're here for.
One of the greatest joys I had was when going back through this on the first read through, the first time I was rereading it, I should say.
Yeah.
All those little nuggets that stick out to you, you're like, oh my gosh. And you didn't,
Yes.
I know what that means now. Yeah, you're very overwhelmed the first time. I can see that. But the story's still epic.
Oh, it's still amazing. I mean, it doesn't take away from how epic it is, because there's so much crazy stuff that happens on the surface. I mean, just think of the knife-fighting assassins, gravity-defying, all that craziness, dude. That is just, and then the Talani mass showing up. Dude, there's enough, and the brutality of the war. I mean, just think about all the craziness that just exists. There's just so much going on. I can understand why it can be overwhelming, but dude, it's because that's one of the reasons I love this book, because it's like, unlike most writers, I feel like it's like they're tying high points together. It's like it's never tying high points together with him. It's just like the story just kind of naturally escalates for some reason. It's like we're given a break. We're never given a break. It's just like we have to take this time to fill you in on a bunch of information, because now it's going to really hit the fan in the next other. You need to know this going in, because it's about to really get. If you thought it was deep now, wait till the next chapter. It's getting fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, his master of escalation, I think.
Yeah. All right, so Krull has said power attracts power. Kruppa nodded. He says, Kruppa is no fool, Krull. He openly opposes no one, and he finds power a thing to be avoided at all costs. I had mentioned this earlier, right, that Kruppa, we were talking about what he is and how powerful is he, and he actively avoids attention, right?
But he doesn't. But he avoids, that's why he's a master. We know he's a mentor as a thief to Crocus, but he's obviously a magician of no small skill, and obviously some kind of intellect as well. I mean, there's like I said, he's an enigma for sure, because he's got lots of different parts he keeps to himself. I have a hard time believing it's all due to cynicism. How would he know how to use magic if it was?
I don't know how he protects himself then.
Yeah, how did he will that spell that he could see people?
Unless he's elder.
Dun,
dun, dun.
Right?
That just.
But Krull would have said so. I would think those two. But he does have the KRU, and there's Krull. Is this his mortal incarnation of Krull? Is Kruppa?
It's too far.
That's a bridge past a bridge too far.
Maybe on this read through, I'll finally find a tidbit of information that tells me what Kruppa is.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh goodness.
As these two spoke, the Reeve woman had taken Tattersail in her arms and was rocking rhythmically and softly chanting. Her water had broken. Pran squatted nearby, silently forming words with his mouth. Suddenly, the Reeve woman tossed the body away. It crumpled into a lifeless heap. When I read that, I thought, man, Bellerdan would be upset. But Bellerdan isn't around to be upset about it anymore, so... The moon hung immediately overhead, so bright that Kruppa couldn't look directly at it. The Reeve woman squatted in labor. Pran remained immobile, his body racked in shivering bouts that twisted his face with pain. His eyes opened wide, glowing bright amber, and fixed on the moon. Kruppa asks Krull if Tattersail will remember her former life. Krull says that's unknown, since soul-shifting is a delicate thing. Tattersail was consumed in a conflagration. Her soul's first flight was carried on wings of pain and violence, where it entered another ravaged body bearing its own traumas. The child born will be like no other ever seen. Kruppa grunts and notes that, given her parents, the child will be exceptional. Realizing something, Kruppa asks Krull about the first child within the Reeve. Krull says, "There was none, Kruppa. The Reeve woman was prepared in a manner unknown to any man." He chuckled, then says, "Including myself, this sorcery belongs to the moon, Kruppa." Ah, the mysterious ways of women.
Right? Right? Oh, that's too funny.
Kruppa and Krull watched the labor for hours, more hours than it seemed the night could hold. The moon remained overhead the entire time, as if guarding them. Finally, they heard a cry, and the Reeve lifted a small child furred in silver. The fur sloughed away. The Reeve woman raised the child to her mouth and cut the umbilical cord with her teeth. That's hardcore, man.
Pretty hardcore. I would have looked for a sharp rock or something.
Pran walked up to Kruppa and Kroll, looking exhausted. He says, "The child drew from me power beyond my control." The woman held the child against her chest. Kruppa's eyes widened when he saw her flat belly now devoid of the white fox tattoo. Pran says, "I'm saddened that I may not return in 20 years to see the woman this child shall become." Kroll says, "You shall, but not as Talan. As a Talan Imass bonecaster." The breath hissed between Pran's teeth. He asks, "How long?" 300,000 years, Pran Cole of Canig Toll's clan, Kroll responded. Kruppa laid a hand on Pran's arm. He quipped, "You've something to look forward to." Pran stared at him for a moment, then roared with laughter. How else can you respond to something like that?
Oh my goodness! Oh, I know it. There's nothing you can do. I love that he howls with laughter, and I forget so much of this dream stuff of Kruppa's in the later books, and how this is our first glimpse of the humanity of the IMAS. And they're not just undead monsters. They're actual entities. That this is something that's actually, strangely enough, a culmination of something they were looking forward to for 300,000 years, apparently.
Yeah. Tool, he's more loquacious than your average Talan Imass.
Yeah. But, just because apparently everyone he was bound to is dead. So I guess that kept him quiet.
We are provided with a flashback for Kruppa, outlining the events prior to the dream we just went through. Immediately after the events in Baruch's study where the wax coin had spun in the air and disintegrated, and with the revelation of the coin bearer, Kruppa was in the process of leaving the grounds. He realized that Crocus's name was familiar to Baruch because that was the name of Mammoth's nephew, and he notes that all could have been lost. I assume he means Baruch could disrupt his plans for Crocus if he put two and two together.
Yeah, that would be my assumption as well.
Here is a quote of note. "For a time there, Opan's power had waxed considerably. Kruppa smiled at his pun, but it was a distracted smile. He would do well to avoid such contacts. Power had a habit of triggering his own talents. Already he felt the urgings of the deck of dragons within his head." End quote. I thought the mention of Power had a habit of triggering his own talents was interesting. He's such a slippery character. Yeah. It's difficult to put together what exactly he is, kind of along the lines of what we were talking about earlier.
Yes, and that was and was mentioned. Remember the Tobla Kai mentioned in that reference in that poem, or not the poem, but they were giving us history, and they said sometimes those guys could become their own powers. Is he like that? Is he a power unto himself? Did
like
I say
he
that
has
already?
A warren of his own, that type of situation?
Like maybe.
I mean, it's possible his dreams are a
warren,
warren, I guess. Maybe.
Right, because of the fact they're separate. I mean, I'm just kind of curious, and so I hadn't thought about that either until, I don't know what, like I said, this is, when I talk with you, that's one thing I love about doing this with you, is when we look through the notes, I'll sometimes think of things, but sometimes when we're talking, it's different. And so it makes me think differently too. And it makes me ask questions, and it may not be, but it's an interesting thing to think about, because it's just because Kruppa's just so, I know there's things that we know about Kruppa, but there's so much we don't know about Kruppa. And everything he tells about himself is things we already know. He tells you the obvious about himself. That's what's so masterful about him. That's a magic ability almost of itself. It's like his class. It's like he lulls you into some kind of hypnosis or something by just this droning.
He's an illusionist.
Yeah, that may be what he is.
Is Kruppa Steven Erikson's own character? It's like
that would be,
imagine if
that
that
would be great if it was,
because he was talking about illusionists, like that how powerful they were, right?
He said, yeah. Well, think about it. There's, I know that we have a reason to withstand the things that happen later, but at the same time, it's like there's just something with him. I mean,
let's come back to that dream being a Warren thing when we get to the end of the book.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of something specifically, so let's put a pin in that for now. Yeah.
Okay, copy that. Oh, I think I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
As Kruppa is leaving the building, Baruch's servant Roald is entering the building covered in dust and carrying supplies.
I don't mean to interrupt, but there's just for our people that are listening they're listening for some info. Sometimes that is a kind of an abrupt change, and sometimes that does happen in these stories, and because it was from that his dream into this, kind of thing. So don't want people to think that we're not slipping up on you. It's how it works sometimes. Sometimes it shifts like that real quick.
You're talking about the transition from the dream to the flashback to events leading up to the dream?
Yes.
I had considered doing it like we did with the Battle of Pale and putting it in sequence, but I was like,
Oh, yeah, that's a lot of work.
In the Battle of Pale, it kind of made sense because the story was, you didn't know enough of the stuff happening prior to it to really understand what was happening, so it made sense in that case. In this case, I don't know that it really affects the dream at all, right?
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. It's just it's an odd jumping in this chapter because of what's going on. It's inceptioning us.
Right. As Kruppa is leaving the building, Baruch's servant Roald is entering the building covered in dust and carrying supplies. Kruppa offers his assistance. Roald says no, but asks if Kruppa can close the doors on his way out. Kruppa walks out of the building and notes the gate to the street has been left open. He sees swirling dust beyond and thinks it's from the road repairs. He remembers that he didn't close the doors behind him. There's a headache behind his eyes, and the bright light isn't helping. He turns around and closes the doors. As he was turning to leave, there was a shout in the street beyond, followed by a loud crash. Crash was lost on him, though. A storm roared in his head, and he fell to his knees. His head snapped up. He whispers, "That was indeed a Malazan curse. Then why does House Shadow's image burn like fire in Kruppa's skull? Who now walks the streets of Darujistan? Mysteries solved, more mysteries created." The pain passed, and he stood, brushing the dust off his clothes. He says, "Good that said affliction occurred beyond the eyes of suspicious beings," Kruppa notes with relief. "All upon a promise made to friend Roald. Wise old friend Roald. Opon's breath is this time welcome, though begrudgingly so."
Speaking Kruppa is a skill. It's okay. You're okay. You'll be okay. As soon as you're past the Kruppa stuff, you're going to be all right.
It's a nightmare reading this guy out.
It is. It's hard to read out loud.
Kruppa strode to the gates and looked out into the street. A cart filled with broken cobbles had toppled. Two men were arguing incessantly as to whose fault it was while they righted the cart and refilled it. As Kruppa studied them, he noted that they spoke the Daru tongue well, but if he listened carefully, there was a hint of an accent that didn't belong. He says, "Oh my," and stepped back. He adjusted his coat, then took a deep breath, opened the gate, and walked into the street. I'm really impressed that the Malazans know the Daru tongue. I guess they're effectively the equivalent of the U.S. Spec Ops teams in the military, which are required to learn multiple languages sometimes.
Oh,
like Navy SEALs.
It could be.
It's like a real big benefit if you know multiple languages.
Sure. Well, it's like I have a couple questions. Do they speak Daru in the Seven Cities?
No, I don't think so. Because Daru is the
Okay.
Darujistan language, right?
Right. I know it's Darujistan, but I kind of feel like Daru, at least maybe it's this continent. Maybe it's like French. It's like the lingua franca of this continent. But it's that maybe it's the trade language or something like that, because there's people in Pale, and there's people from Pale fleeing. There was
no mention of a language in Pale, but you have to imagine. Well, you don't have to imagine. I mean, they're like city-states.
They would have to.
They don't necessarily have to speak the language, because you got Rivi in between. They probably speak their own language. Yeah. Maybe, I mean, they're 1,000 miles apart or more, 1,500 miles or so, right?
Yeah.
Who knows? Yeah.
So I don't know. I'm really curious.
Yeah.
I like how this is what's kind of funny, because how that, because this is what's so odd is that this is where Kruppa is flashing back at this point, because this is where he mentioned already in the dream he was aware that there was Malazan spies here.
Yes.
And this is where it's revealed. So this is the flashback. And now we're back on real time, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. In the street, Whiskey Jack watches Kruppa, the fat little man with flopping sleeves, walk from the house's gate and turn left. He seemed in a hurry. The stories have merged. Things are moving forward. That's great. Yes, I love that.
And the streams are crossing.
Yeah. Sorry tells him that's the one. Whiskey Jack asks if she's sure. She confirms that she is. Whiskey Jack asks what's so important about him. Sorry says, I admit to some uncertainty as to his significance, but he is vital, Sergeant. Whiskey Jack asks who lives in the estate, and when Sorry tells him that it's an alchemist named Baruch, he scowled and wondered how she knew that. He asks if the fat man is Baruch. She says no, he works for the alchemist, not a servant. A spy, perhaps. His skills involve thievery, and he possesses talent. Whiskey Jack asks, a seer? Sorry winced. Whiskey Jack watched, bemused as her face paled. He wondered what on earth was happening with this girl. She says, I believe so, in a trembling voice. Whiskey Jack straightened up, and then he tells her, all right, follow him. She nodded shakily and slipped into the crowd. I have to quote this next paragraph. It's one of those great ones.
Yeah.
Quote, the sergeant rested his back against the wagon's sidewall. His expression soured as he studied his squad. Trotz was swinging his pick as if on a battlefield. Stones flew everywhere. Passerby ducked and cursed when ducking failed. Hedge and Fiddler crouched behind a wheelbarrow, flinching each time the Barghast's pick struck the street. Mallet stood a short distance away, directing pedestrians to the other pavement. He no longer bellowed at the people, having lost his voice, arguing with an old man with a donkey wobbling under an enormous basket of firewood. The bundles now lay scattered across the street, the old man and the donkey nowhere to be seen, providing an effective barrier to wheeled vehicles. All in all, Whiskey Jack concluded, everyone with him had assumed the role of heat-crazed street worker with a facility he found oddly disturbing. Hedge and Fiddler had acquired the wagon, loaded down with cobbles, less than an hour after their midnight landing at a public dock on the lakefront. Exactly how this had been accomplished, Whiskey Jack was afraid to ask, but it suited their plans perfectly. End quote. I love so much here in this. I love that when he surveys the scene, he gets a sour look on his face. Trot's going crazy with that pickaxe. That's a great image right there.
Oh, absolutely.
Hedge and Fiddler cowering behind the wheelbarrow. I mean, these guys are crazy throwing explosives, and if they're cowering behind the wheelbarrow, that's quite something to get them to do that.
Yeah.
That old man with the donkey, where did they go? Why did they leave the wood? I assume it's worth something, right?
Yeah, I'm assuming that we ended up either fighting and giving them money for it, or it's all part of blocking the way. And
yeah,
it could be cover. It could be brilliant.
Yeah.
It could be all part of their brilliant little scheme.
I want to know how Fiddler and Hedge got that wagon.
I know, I do too.
I mean, the whole thing is so good, and this is the stuff that makes me love Erikson's writing and the Bridge Burners so much. I mean, it's too good.
You know, he does something that a lot of writers just have a hard time doing, and that's hinting at things that I don't want spelled out necessarily, but just it's that those kind of things about the people that are in the crew. You know, there's the wagon. I don't know where it came from. It's just stuff like that other people work hard at, I think, and it just seems. He may work hard at it too, but it feels effortless to me, the way that these characters are just so real.
Yeah, it's dialed in the way he does it.
Yeah, so beautiful.
Mm-hmm. Something nagged at the back of Whiskey Jack's mind, but he dismissed it, thinking he was a soldier and a soldier followed orders. When the time came, there would be chaos at every major intersection of streets in Darujistan. Fiddler had been the one to point out the difficulty with mining Darujistan and had proposed doing it right in front of everyone, with them disguised as road repair workers. True to Fiddler's prediction, no one had questioned them yet. They had been allowed to rip up the streets and plant Maranth munitions encased in fire-hardened clay. Whiskey Jack asked himself if everything was going to be so easy. Then his thoughts returned to Sari, and he concluded, not likely. Quick Ben and Kalam had somehow managed to convince Whiskey Jack that they would be better off without Sari in tow. I bet they did, those slippery devils.
Oh, I love those rascals, man. Those guys are more squirrely than Hedge and Fid,
yes.
I think. Yes. It's that Seven Cities squirrely.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know what there is about it, but there's something about the Seven Cities and their squirreliness that I love.
Yeah, there's something about those two. It's almost like they grew up getting in trouble together. And
I know it.
They just have that way of working together to get in trouble or get out of trouble.
Yeah.
Right?
I think they get in trouble to get out of trouble.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Uh-huh. Sari had tagged along with Whiskey Jack's crew, and her eyes never rested. But outside of that, she had offered little in the way of assistance. Whiskey Jack was relieved now that he had sent her off following the Fat Man's trail. Again, Whiskey Jack wonders what had pulled her into the world of war. He couldn't get past her youth and couldn't see past her cold, dead eyes. Even though he still told the squad she was as human as any of them, the more questions he couldn't answer about her, the more his doubts grew. He still knew nothing about her, and had been surprised with the revelation that she could manage a fishing boat. In Darujistan, she hadn't acted like a girl from a fishing village. She had a natural poise that made her seem like she came from the higher educated classes. Wherever she went, she carried herself as if she belonged there, which didn't sound like a 17-year-old girl.
Right.
He's having difficulty reconciling her visible age with her actions, particularly her behavior when torturing those men in Nathalog. Contemplating despair, he thought to himself that it demands direction. Find the direction and the despair goes away. For him, it wasn't that easy. The despair he felt had no shape. It wasn't just Sari, the endless war, or even the treachery from within the Empire. He had nowhere to look for answers, and he was tired of asking questions. Seeing her torture those men had forced him to see what he was turning into. A killer stripped of remorse, armored in the cold iron of inhumanity, freed from the necessity to ask questions, to seek answers, to fashion a reasonable life like an island in a sea of slaughter. Turning his thoughts to the future, he reminded himself that in the days and nights ahead, people would die by his command. He'd made his plans as if nothing of himself was at stake. Yet, his friends might die, and friends of others might die, and sons, daughters, parents. At least he finally admits to himself that his squad are his friends.
Yeah, I really like that moment of recognition. I think he's always, we've known this, and he knows it, but I think he was afraid to voice it.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because he maintained that kind of separation as commander and leader. Yeah.
No.
And that entire section there really dove deep into his current mental state, and what a sad state it is. It's really not good.
No, it's not. It's one thing to be a soldier, but I can't imagine being a soldier where it's just been like what you've probably been doing for 20 years. And I mean, it's not like you're stationed and chilling. Mm-hmm. It's like, no, you're on the advance. Mm-hmm. You're kind of chilling when you're when you were trying to dig a hole that turned out to be a grave for most of your friends. But
yeah. I mean, that in and of itself is bad enough, right? Never seen the light of day for 2 years.
Yeah.
Turn into Morlocks.
Very bad. Yeah.
Shaken by his thoughts, Whiskey Jack looks up from the street and sees a man, which we know as Baruch, looking down at him from a window. His hands are stained red. This shakes Whiskey Jack even further. Whiskey Jack bit the inside of his lips so hard he tasted blood. He told himself to concentrate or he'd die, and not just him, but his whole squad. They trusted him to get them out of this, and he had to keep earning that trust. He spit blood onto the street and hissed to himself. There, it's easy to look at, isn't it? Fiddler and Hedge walked up, wearing troubled expressions. Fiddler asks if Whiskey Jack is all right. Mallet also walked up. Whiskey Jack grimaces and says, "We're behind schedule. How much longer?" Fiddler and Hedge looked at each other, and Hedge responds, 3 hours. Fiddler says, "We decided on 7 mines, 4 sparkers, 2 flamers, and 1 cusser." We still haven't learned what these actually do, but their names give a little bit of a hint. You probably don't know what a cusser is yet. You'll find that out. The other 2 are kind of self-explanatory a little bit.
Yeah.
Whiskey Jack asks if that will bring down some of the buildings. Fiddler says, "Sure. No better way to block an intersection." Right. Hedge asks if there's a particular building Whiskey Jack wants dropped. Whiskey Jack tells them the estate behind them belongs to an alchemist. "Right," Hedge says. "That should light the sky all right."
Yeah.
Fiddler grinned at Hedge as he said this. These are mad men.
Yeah. These are the kind of people I love reading about, but if you knew them, you'd go the other way if you saw them coming. I'm sure these are natural-born troublemakers, these 2.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh.
Whiskey Jack tells them they have 2.5 hours. Mallet steps up and softly asks Whiskey Jack, "Another headache?" Whiskey Jack closed his eyes and nodded sharply. Mallet raised a hand to his forehead. He says, "Just easing it a little." Whiskey Jack grinned ruefully. He says, "This is getting old, Mallet. You're even using the same words." He could feel a cool numbness as it flowed through his thoughts. Mallet lowered his hand. He says, "When we have time, I'll find the source, Whiskey Jack." Whiskey Jack smiled. He responds, "Right, when we have time." Mallet tells him he hopes Kalam and Quick Ben are doing okay, then asks if Whiskey Jack sent Sari off. Whiskey Jack confirms he did and tells Mallet that the rest of the squad is on its own. The other 3 know where to find them. Whiskey Jack looks back up to the window and sees the man with the red hands is still there, though he is looking out over the rooftops. Whiskey Jack looks back down at the map he has spread out and sees every major intersection, the barracks, and Majesty Hill had been circled in red. That's quite the bold attack there. So many major areas.
Yeah. And especially, this is just a few fellas that's doing this, that's preparing the way. It's in such masterful tactics for creating chaos here. Beautiful.
Yeah, love it.
Oh, man, I love it.
Whiskey Jack gets Mallet's attention and tells him he bit the inside of his cheek again. Mallet raises his hand to heal the wound.
These aren't the droids you're looking for. Sorry.
We're going to stop here this week and then finish the rest of the chapter next week.
Oh, good read, though.
Yep. For standout moments, the reveal of what Tattersail had moved into was crazy. Nightchill's body and the state that it was in. I mean, we kind of had an idea, but actually having it described was rough.
Yeah, seeing it, man, that's horrific, dude. It's got to be. I just love how all that stuff happened. I love how strong Tattersail really is too. We know this because it's been told that she's turned down the High Mage gig in the past, so she's powerful.
Yeah. The fact that the dream bridged time was really cool. I thought that was neat.
I really enjoyed that whole bit. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. The ritual itself, the transitioning of Tattersail into the baby and the birth, particularly with the moon hanging directly overhead, had some strong imagery.
That imagery really resounds with me on a different level because I'm a huge comic book reader, and in particular Neil Gaiman, the guy that did Sandman. The moon imagery is very strong, and when he's written some of his female characters, and I think that's even they even do that in the television show. I think that somebody pulls the moon closer. And so anything with the moon kind of always, especially when that idea of it hanging directly overhead for some time, always, I don't know why that's something that always kind of strong imagery for me mentally for some reason.
Yeah, kind of.
I love the moon.
Evokes
I'm drawn to the moon.
Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask a little bit, doesn't it?
See, I haven't played much Zelda. It's funny. I played a lot. I played the Breath of the Wild, the new one, but I have only played the original Legend of Zelda, and Breath of the Wild.
Okay,
I haven't played anything in between, and I'd like to, but dude, I've logged a ridiculous amount of Breath of the Wild. I'm about 500 hours.
Oh wow!
I keep restarting. I love that game. It's kind of chill. It's not so violent as other games, and sometimes it's just nice to run around and do chill things.
I watch my kids play it a little bit.
It's a pretty sweet game.
Yeah. Kruppa realizing the Malazans were already there was one of those moments like you see in those infiltration movies where someone realizes the enemy is already here.
Yes. But the funny thing for me, it's that does Kruppa tell Baruch this, or do we know that Baruch knows, I think, something's going on. I don't know that you remember the omen of the red wash.
At that exact moment, he's like, "I will find you," and they're right in the street below. Right?
I know it. No, they are. It's just
that's the irony of that.
I love it.
Yeah.
So
I don't know that he tells him.
No, he must not.
Yeah.
It's like, but this is where that's why Kruppa is so different, because he appears to be working for Baruch, but is he?
No.
I don't
He's
think so.
using him.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Does he work for anybody? I mean, he's doing something for Krull, kind of, but it's not like he's under orders, I don't feel. He's just being cool to Krull because, hey, why not befriend an elder god?
Whiskey Jack surveying the squad and seeing them taking on the role of the heat-crazed street workers, that whole section there, loved it.
Yes. It's another one of those, I think that you and I we keep coming back to the Marines, and that, his Marines are so well written, so real, so funny.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like I said, I love reading them. I don't know if I'd want to hang out with these old boys. I'd probably be one of the first ones killed, I'm sure.
Learning more about Whiskey Jack's mental state, though really sad, is important. And you can't help but feel for him and how trapped he feels in his current position, or even the responsibility he feels for his squad.
Oh, I know it. It's real heavy. It weighs, heavy weighs the crown.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then, of course, I liked how the storylines are finally being tied together here as well between the Rouge Stand and the Bridge Burners. So timelines are getting synced up.
Yeah, and if you thought it was crazy before, man, it's going to get really good.
We say that every time. It just keeps escalating.
It does. Well, am I wrong?
No.
Am I wrong?
No. Yeah.
I may be an a-hole, but I'm not wrong.
Yeah. Cool. All right. You have any final thoughts?
No, I really, again, just enjoyed the episode, and I look forward to next week.
Yeah, good job tonight.
Great job, man.
Yep. All right. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next week.
Yes, great episode. We can't wait to see you next week.
We thank you all for joining us today.
Again, we really like to thank you for taking the time to be with us, and we've had a really great time talking about the topic today.
If you would like to support our show, you can find us at HorseFrogProductions.com, where you can find our Patreon link. Depending on the platform you're listening from, it may also be in the episode description.
And if you'd like to contact us through email, it's at contact@horsefrogproductions.com.